Welcome to KOCT's Roundtable. My name is Kent Davey, and I'm your host for this important program to help you decide who should represent the 49th Congressional District. The primary election this June 7th will decide which of the two of the 7 candidates running for this post will face off in November. As you know, this year is a midterm election, so the president is not on the ballot, but the balance of power in Congress could change depending on your vote. Oceanside is in the 49th Congressional District, which is one of the hot races in the country. In other words, a lot of money is being spent by both Democrats and Republicans to gain control of this seat. It stretches from Orange County through Camp Pendleton to Solana Beach. To give you a little background, this district was part of the so-called Blue Wave in 2018 when Democrat Mike Levin defeated a Republican and turned what had been a Republican district for years into a Democratic one. But after recent redistricting, voter registrations are now evenly balanced, so this is a highly competitive race. You could receive a ballot in the mail anytime after May 9th, and you can mail that in if you want at any time after that until primary election day. Who's running? 5 Republicans and 1 Democrat are challenging Levin in his bid for a 3rd term. In alphabetical order, their names are Lisa Bartlett, Brian Marriott, Hosea O'Neill, Chris Rodriguez, Nadia Smalley, and Renee Taylor. So stay with us for this edition of Journalist Roundtable. I'd like to welcome Cybersecurity Manager and Airman Renee Taylor. Good morning. Could you briefly tell us who you are and why you're running?
Sure. Renee Taylor. I've lived in San Juan Capistrano for over the past 20 years. And so as you stated, I'm a cybersecurity manager and airman, meaning that I've served in the United States Air Force Air National Guard for 24 years. Why am I running? Because the time is now. I've always had an interest in being a leader, a national leader, and with recent developments on a state, national, and global level, I decided now is the time. Specifically, through my background and experiences, I feel I'm the best candidate who understands what individuals and families are going through. I understand homelessness. I understand the needs of the aging and the elderly. I understand border security. I understand economics. I understand cybersecurity. So all the things.
All right. Well, let's get to there's a lot in the news right now.
Yes.
So let's get to some of them. Yesterday in Politico, there was a circulation of a story about a draft opinion circulating in the Supreme Court that would reverse Roe versus Wade. Do you think, I'm curious of your views of that news story, what should happen with regard to abortion? Should it be limited to first trimester or otherwise restricted? Should it be allowed? What are your views?
Okay, so first with respect to the leaking of this story, a lot of folks do a knee-jerk reaction, and I'm not one of those to make an immediate decision or opinion. I do what's called an OODA loop, observe, orient, decide, and act, right? So, and then the other thing that's concerning about the alleged leak is that how was it leaked in the first place? Do we need to consider this as some obstruction of justice? Now, getting to Roe v. Wade, should it be repealed? What, and what are my personal views? So right now, Roe v. Wade is the land of the law, right? And as such, we must respect it. Now, personal opinion is, I do believe that life begins at conception, right? And life is precious. However, there are times in a woman's life that they may need to make a decision to end a pregnancy. And I would only support that if it would be in violence against women, in incest, or violence against minors. Then we get to, should there be a limit, for example, for trimesters. I've been watching Texas and Florida with the term limitations, if you will, anywhere, I believe, from 6 weeks to 15 weeks. So I would agree with a term limit. I would suggest, I think there's been like heartbeat bills, so that might be something to consider when they're after a heartbeat. I would say that would be unacceptable. But I do want to just reemphasize that violence against women is unacceptable, and we don't want to have to re-victimize women and even young ladies, you know, who have been victims of rape or incest.
Okay. Also in the news lately has been a proposal by the Biden administration that there be a Disinformation Governance Board created under the auspices of the Department of Homeland Security. What do you think of that idea?
So it's a lot of folks consider it a ministry of truth, and so I think it is censorship. And we should know what's going on. In order to make the most informed decisions and best strategies for decisions in the future, we need to know all information, and we need to be available to have crucial conversations, right? So there's influence operations, information operations is something that's been going on, you know, in terms of war and helping other countries. But to do it under the auspices of Department of Homeland Security, and who is to decide what is true or untrue? You know, I think that is government overreach, and really will have negative impacts on our ability to have crucial conversations and come up with decisions in the best interest of our individuals, our families, and our nation.
Okay. Recently, the Biden administration asked Congress to pass another $33 billion of aid to support the war in Ukraine. Do you think that's a good idea? Is it too much, too little? Are we in the middle of a proxy war with Russia?
So the $33 billion on top of how many extra billions of dollars are going over to Ukraine. So I've been to Ukraine twice, to Kiev. I was an ambassador on cyber defense through the military, through NATO Partnership for Peace. So one thing so truth is always the first casualty in war and politics, right? So alluding to previously information operations and influence operations, it's very hard to find out what is the ground truth. So the money that is being spent in Ukraine certainly could be better served here at home. We have homeless veterans, we have Marine Corps families that are having to be on food assistance and housing assistance. So is it too much? Yes. Are we at a proxy war with Russia? You know, again, I'd need to understand what the ground truth is. So, you know, in this conflict between Ukraine and Russia, there are always the unintended consequences and the innocent civilians who are caught in the middle, and that's for whom, you know, I support.
Okay, the Biden administration says one of the consequences of Putin and the decisions with regard to Russia, the Ukrainian war, is what's fueling inflation. We are at a 40-year high with 8.5% year over year last month. What can Congress do about this?
Okay, so one of my responses to that is, I think Teddy Roosevelt said, bull feathers, right? There's a popular saying that the current economic situation is due to the 3 Ps, pandemic, Putin, and I forget what the third one is. But so we are experiencing what's called Bidenflation, what some people refer to as Bidenflation. How are we going to solve it? Number one, the third one was the greed. We really need to produce our own gas and oil. We need to become reliable on ourselves as America with all our natural resources, right? I was answering another question similar to this, and what we're on right now, I believe, is called a cost push inflation because of the cost of commodities, because of the cost of food, because of the cost of oil. And so to counter that, it's going to require monetary, fiscal, and supply side economics, meaning we need to start being able to manufacture, deliver, distribute without reliance on outside sources.
Do you think we're going to fall into a recession?
It looks like we're going there. I believe that for the past 2 quarters, we've seen a decrease, I think, in GDP, I think is the indicator. And so the experts, financial experts say if we go into another quarter with this, we will be seeing recession.
Okay. Another issue that has come up recently, or there's been conversation in the national press, that the administration is thinking about forgiving student debt. Current average student debt is $39,000. I think the median is around $19,000 or $20,000. Should student debt be forgiven? And if so, doesn't that is that unfair to non-college educated taxpayers?
I'll start at the end of your question, that it will place an undue burden on people who do not have college debt. I believe I read a story where forgiving student loan debt will place an additional $13,000 of debt on taxpayers across the nation. So we have people who have been in vocational schools and in trade schools and have not, don't have to incur that debt. So I was a student. I went, through college with an undergraduate and a graduate degree. So what I did, and it comes to personal responsibility, you work when you have to, you get your scholarships, and ultimately joining the National Guard helped pay, paid off some of my student loan debt. So rather than just flat out paying student loan debts, let's give them ways so that they can be self-sufficient to pay down that debt without burdening the taxpayer.
Turning to energy and related things, cost of gasoline being what it is, some places $6 or more a gallon. California sits on 4 to 6 billion barrels of oil in its reserve, another 5 to 7 trillion cubic feet of natural gas in its reserves. Should those be tapped? So my answer to that is before we tap into reserves, and if I understand your question correctly, it would be akin to tapping into the national reserves for petroleum, the stockpiles, which should be used for emergency use only. Well, what I meant by the words were geologists say there are those kinds of proven reserves or potential reserves underneath the ground.
So I'm one who always likes to look into the possibility and an answer to yes. So I'd have to study this and understand all the ramifications first, but my initial answer to you would be yes, let's look into it and see what we can do to start utilizing the reserves in a judicious manner. And also, though, we'd also have to look at any impact to the environment, of course. That would require me to do a little further investigation.
A lot of those reserves, geologists say, are offshore. Would you support the idea that California ought to open up offshore or more offshore drilling?
So I'd like to see first what we can do onshore. And I know there was recently issues last year, I believe, off of Huntington Beach with the oil spills. So that would be something again to consider. Maybe maybe we need to look into better technologies to ensure physical securities, robusting the infrastructure, if you will, to ensure that offshore drilling will indeed be safe and look at it from a risk management perspective.
Governor Newsom has started to ponder, apparently, the idea of not closing Diablo Canyon or delaying its closing, Diablo Canyon nuclear power generating plant. What do you think of that idea?
So last night, as a matter of fact, I was looking into what do we do with spent nuclear fuel. So, and right now, the problem is the interim and the permanent storage of spent nuclear fuel. So apparently we have 40 years worth of spent nuclear fuel, and the government is paying the sites billions of dollars, so it sits there. So right now we do need to look into both interim and permanent siting. So I don't know enough about Diablo to make a decision, but if we can transfer spent nuclear fuel safely, and that Diablo has is a safe and secure place, and I don't know if it's going to be considered an interim or a permanent. So I would need to do more research into Diablo. I was looking more into the Yucca Mountain and how in 2010 it became a consent-cited policy, and so I think that's something we need to figure out how to get over that.
So you would be open to at least exploring whether to reopen development of Yucca Mountain?
I would be, open to exploring. So, that's the thing is fact-finding and exploring doesn't always mean a definite yes or no. We just have to, things change over time, and we'd have to see again, cost-benefit analysis, environmental ramification, how many people are there. You'd have to look at things such as impact of natural disaster.
Mm-hmm. California currently imports about 25% of its electricity, has the third highest retail residential electric rates in the country. What do you do about the high cost of electricity in this state? Is there anything that, as a congresswoman, you could do?
That's a good question. So I look at my electricity bill, and I look at that a lot of the cost is in the distribution. So we have to look at energy production and consumption from not having a single point of failure, right? Mm-hmm. So we need to have secondary, tertiary, other means of providing energy to our houses.
Does that then imply that you would be willing to juice the creation of new nuclear power in this country?
So that's interesting because we have to look at, so we have 40 years of the spent nuclear fuel. And then on my drive down here, I was driving by the San Onofre nuclear generating site. And it's like, we always have to look at the end effect, where will the waste go? Mm-hmm. Is the benefit of restarting nuclear generation worth the cost of, the 40, 50, 100 years of spent nuclear fuel? So I would rather look into other, perhaps more immediate ways of getting energy. Of course, there's the solar. Some folks suggest that windmills might work. I don't believe in that, but we're a very smart, innovative society, and I think if we can have what I call a resilient mesh network of energy protection, that's the best way forward.
The development of the alternative renewable energy supplies, driven in part by the desire to eliminate greenhouse gas emissions. What is your general view of climate change and the push to try and ease the risk of climate change?
Okay. So on climate change, I've been doing some research on that too. And NASA has an interesting perspective on climate change. So climate change is not just from human actions and behavior. Climate change can also be from volcanic eruptions, from solar flares, and things external to what we as humans do here on Earth. But then again, climate change comes from the energy we use in food production and in cooking. So there's multiple facets of climate change. Do I think it is one of our biggest priorities? No. And for that I'll probably get a lot of pushback. Mm-hmm. But what can we do to negate any further impact of climate change? I am one, for example, this morning and every Wednesday we get landscapers, and they come with their gas-powered leaf blowers and their lawnmowers. Mm-hmm. And so there are little things that we can do. And for example, those leaf blowers, they turn around and they put the gas right inside our house. So maybe we should consider starting on a small scale. What can we eventually remove and replace gas-powered with, battery-powered? Starting with the leaf blowers, with the lawnmowers. What can we do on an individual basis to reduce our own carbon footprint? So there's a saying, alone we can do so little, together we can do so much. So it would come from, from individuals, communities, states, and the nation.
Okay. Changing the topic, there are currently about 11 million undocumented people who live in the United States. There are thousands, apparently, of people queuing up at least on our southern border, wishing to enter illegally. What should be done about the border and the immigration issue?
Sure. In 2006, I was part of what was called Operation Jumpstart at the southwest border. And so I have firsthand been to the border, and I have seen the effects of unlawful immigration. So as an example, I was going from San Diego out to El Centro, and Customs and Border Protection was on an ATV, and they were apprehending a gentleman for his 9th time coming across the border. I went into the evening, they were doing night operations, and with the night vision, I could see groups and groups coming across the border, scattering up into trees and going onto rooftops of buildings. So what we need to do, yes, as humans, we feel empathy, and our hearts break for those who, who are coming here and fleeing their countries for whatever reason, but we cannot just have free and open borders. So to mitigate the effects, I look at from a cybersecurity perspective, defense in depth, administrative, technical, and physical controls. So administrative, we have good policies, but the policies need to be enforced, right? From a technical policy, we can do a much better job at points of entry by having, scanners for the cargo and for the cars, and for aerial surveillance with, UAVs. For the physical, yes, we need to look into some kind of physical barrier, whether it's a wall or whatnot. And also, right now we're having shortage of housing, we're having problems with food. And so how, as a nation, are we going to take care of our lawful residents, and how are we going to reduce their economic concerns by allowing others to come in here? So again, it's not about being unkind or uncaring. It's about taking care of the law, our American citizens first, and then seeing what we can do to stem the illegal and unlawful immigration.
On that score, there are approximately 2 million people in the U.S. who would be qualified as dreamers under the legislation that's been passed by a couple Congresses in a row, or the Houses, a couple never made it through the Senate into law. What do you do about those 2 million dreamers?
And the dreamers, as I understand it, and maybe you can help correct my thinking, what the dreamers are the younger folks who have come over here unlawfully and are seeking to improve their lives. Again, I understand we have all needs and wants, but those needs and wants need to be realized through lawful means.
Does that mean that if that you would prefer seeing dreamers and presumably their families sent back to their home countries, and even though, say, they may be kids who have spent their entire childhood up into adulthood as in the U.S.?
So that's one thing where it comes back. How do we can't pay or penalize children for the sins of the fathers. So let's put it like that. So we'd have to, take another look at who has been here the longest. Are they going through school? Are they in college? Are they paying taxes? What can we do? Those children were brought here through no fault of their own, right? And so we'd have to see what we would have to do. Now, if they're at the age where separating the family is something that we have to consider, meaning sending the adults back and allowing the children who were here. Again, it's a wicked problem, and it's going to take a lot of looking into, again, the policy and how do we meet the needs of both the people here lawfully and show some empathy for those who were brought here.
Another wicked problem in current American society is the number of opioid and prescription drug fentanyl deaths reaching, I think, about 100,000 last year. What should the federal government do to try and stem this?
So my understanding, this goes also back to the border security, and I would say this, you know, again, can be addressed by the technical and physical measures to protect our borders. And for example, with the cargo trucks coming through, a lot of folks are very unhappy because it takes such an inordinate amount of time to get the cargo across the ports of entry. However, haste makes waste, right? So we need to make sure that the physical and technical inspections of cargo are very well investigated and vetted. So we'll have to, you know, that's one at the border. And then, you know, we have to look at then the cartels and the folks who are, you know, organized, if you will, that are making, you know, bringing the fentanyl and the drugs over the border. So it's, again, you know, something we've been fighting for good grief since like the 1980s. So.
Federal housing policy is a housing first policy that has roots back several decades, I guess. But basically what it says is house homeless people first, then worry about treatment for drug addiction, treatment for mental health issues, those things being the chief contributors to homelessness. What would be your view of that housing first policy, and what role the federal government ought to be playing in trying to deal with our homeless problem?
Sure. So I have a different approach, perhaps not to housing first, but one of the things when I talk to people about homelessness is, what does homelessness look like? Who is really, what does a homeless person look like? And most people would say, oh, it's somebody, you know, with mental addiction, drug addiction, etc. I will tell you, the person you're looking at was once homeless through no fault of my own. I moved cross country for a job with the Air National Guard unit in another state. I got there and I was told, you know what, we've changed our mind. And in one fell swoop, my mother and I were homeless. I was unemployed and penniless. Wow. Okay? So that being said, now I understand, but then because of that, I can tell you how we are going to address homelessness. So number one, we identify, you know, in geographic areas, where do we have the highest concentration of homelessness, right? And then within that population of homeless, do we have folks who are, number one, veterans, and number two, elderly? Those would be the first two groups that I would say we need to find help for, right? Within those groups, who have mental health issues, who have addiction issues, who are just bohemian lifestyle.
Okay, we are basically out of time, so I'm sorry to say, but let me ask a kind of wrap-up question. If you had a scale for, say, GOP candidates that runs from Mitt Romney on one end to Donald Trump on the other, where on that scale would you put yourself?
So, on some subjects a 5, some other using a 10. So on average, I'm a 5.5,
okay.
6. I see myself as a moderate conservative, if you will.
Okay, thank you very much, Renee Taylor.
Thank you.
Appreciate this conversation.
KOCT, the voice of North County.